Whether you're getting ready for round one of the playoffs, advancing to round two, or still somehow fighting to make it to your postseason, it doesn't matter. You have to be active. Look for the top pickups of the week, and that's where I'm going to help you out. Let's go over the waiver wire pickups for week 15 of the fantasy football season and run down the biggest injuries. Compared to last week, this was basically nothing injury-wise, but you know what it lacked in quantity, it kind of made up for in quality because there were some big names who did leave early. We might as well just start in Houston, like last week. You know, for Texans fans, when everything was looking great this season, promising future ahead with all these young players, losing Tank Dell for the season was a blow, and somehow this week feels worse. First injury of the week was Nico Collins, the guy who was going to pick up the slack and had already been breaking out this season. He left early with a calf injury and did not come back. That obviously hurt. It's not clear exactly how long he'll be out. This isn't something that is major like Tank Dell's, but at the same time, I can't say right now for sure whether he'll be available in week 15. But then it did get worse because later in the game, CJ Stroud left with a concussion. He didn't come back either, which means Davis Mills took over. Now, one thing that we've noticed this season with the concussion protocol, it feels like the first half early on in this season, guys who were out in the protocol, they were missing a game almost all the time. But lately, it feels like that's been trimmed down. We'll have guys who come back right away. It doesn't feel like as many players are missing, and sometimes guys just seem to clear it all together without missing practice during the week. Maybe this is just trying to be optimistic that Stroud returns, but I'll just say it's not clear right now whether he's going to play week 15 either, but this whole Texans offense is hurting. And then for fantasy owners, this one probably stung the hardest. You've been waiting so long for Justin Jefferson to come back. And just when you thought the number one player in fantasy drafts was finally going to help you out just in time for the postseason, it didn't take long for that just to be snatched away. And the thing is, this is a new injury. It wasn't the hamstring. No, Jefferson took a hard hit and left. It was a chest injury, what they called it, and was actually taken to the hospital for precautionary reasons. They have to do this sort of evaluation when it's a hard hit like that, check to make sure there's nothing wrong internally, also check the ribs. And so it doesn't seem like he has anything major in terms of damage. But again, at this point, that's easy for me to say. Things always come up during the week. So we're going to have to monitor JJ's status. And maybe partially because of that hit and that ball, JJ was basically left hanging out to dry there, and he got punished for it. So not an injury, but I think we can say goodbye to Josh Dobbs as a starter because he sat out the rest of that game, the second half, not because he was hurt, but because he's just been bad again. So he was officially benched for Nick Mullins. And then another Viking injury. Before all that, Alexander Mattison left with an ankle injury. And this one is concerning because it sounds like it's a right high ankle sprain, which probably means multiple weeks out. So Ty Chandler did step in, will be the guy, it looks like. I wish I could say that Chandler is going to be one of my top waiver wire ads for this week because he might be the lead running back here, but and the way this offense looked, let's remember this game was a 0-0 tie until the final minutes of the fourth quarter. And this was against the Raiders, right? Not some shutdown defense. And now we're talking about a third string quarterback, star receiver Jefferson out again. I mean, sure, if you, for some reason, were starting Madison every week, if you're just hurting at running back, you can scoop up Chandler, but you can't expect a whole lot. And in that same game, we had the other side's running back, Josh Jacobs, workhorse, fantasy stud, also leave. This is being called a hyperextension to his right knee, which could include ligament damage. You definitely want to monitor this during the week to see exactly how much time he will miss, but it's almost certain he's out for week 15 because the Raiders play on Thursday night. There's no way he'll be ready in time, and that means we're going to look at some sort of combination of Zamir White on early downs and then probably Amir Abdullah on passing downs. Needless to say, this is that same offense that also didn't score in this game against the Vikings, and you can't be too thrilled with either of those options, but if you had Jacobs and now you don't have Jacobs, you need somebody, your waiver wire's thin, you could try one of those guys. And Justin Herbert also, the worst possible time, leaving the game early with a finger injury. This was his right index finger, and that's his throwing hand. So this is definitely a concern because, as Dr. David Chow mentioned on social media, Herbert is an index finger dominant thrower, the way he grips the ball. Obviously, anything to the throwing hand is going to affect the quarterback, but this wasn't even just the thumb or the pinky. This was his index finger. This is going to affect the way he throws, and of course, the pain tolerance here. So Herbert, who knows exactly how long this will affect him, but we saw Easton stick throughout the second half of the game, and you saw how that went, as if the Chargers offense didn't have enough problems already. And then finally, worth mentioning that Tutu Atwell also left that game early with a concussion. He hadn't been particularly relevant in fantasy, but that offense has been coming on. Seems like you want a piece of it, so there could be other guys now who fill the void there for the Rams. So now let's figure out who are the top players that you should be targeting on waivers to pick up for your postseason run or just as an injury replacement. First, a reminder, it's not too late to try Underdog Fantasy. They've got special promotions going on all the time. But let's try this one. If you're new to Underdog, if you have not tried it yet, Tua Tagovailoa just getting 1 yard on Monday Night Football, one of those two games. He just needs a yard. It's like they're trying to give away money because they are. They do it all the time during the holiday season. You're going to continue to see special promos, but this one right here is a free pick 'em. You take this, you go higher on 0.5 total yards for Tua, and then you combine it with any other pick. You can triple your very first pick 'em. And you'll still get that 100% deposit match up to $100 limit just for signing up. So check it out now. Make sure you use promo code ENDGAME so that you can take advantage of these offers. One player did not get to really talk about on last week's waiver wire or even on the Beat the Breakout because this was a midweek injury. We're not sure the status of Isaiah Pacheco. Well, now we know. He missed week 14, could miss more. Andy Reid did not even rule out the possibility of an IR stint. And so who's going to fill the void? Of course, it's Jerick McKinnon. Now, actually, they announced Clyde Edwards-Helaire would be the lead back, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire did get more carries than McKinnon, but it doesn't matter. Who got the goal line carry here and scored the touchdown? It was McKinnon. Who's got that massive touchdown upside? As we saw last year when he somehow went 6 straight games, scoring a touchdown in every game throughout the second half of the season. That was a total of 9 touchdowns of the final 6 weeks of the NFL season, making him basically a league winner in fantasy. It was Jerick McKinnon. In this game against Buffalo, CEH, 11 carries, leading the way, 39 yards. That's about what you could expect from Edwards-Helaire. Look, McKinnon didn't have great numbers. He only carried it 4 times, 19 yards, but he got that touchdown, caught 3 passes. This wasn't a big game from, well, the Chiefs offense at all. But here's good news. Next week, they get the New England Patriots. And when it comes down to it, we've seen this Chiefs wide receiver core again and again make crucial mistakes. At this point, it's Kelsey and McKinnon. Those are probably the only guys Mahomes feels like he can even trust. You can't say McKinnon's upside is the highest because he will get limited touches, but you see what he can do with those touches. He has touchdown upside every single time he touches the ball, every time he plays, and he will get receptions. I feel like he'll be even more involved next week after barely touching the ball this entire season. But there's a reason he was being saved for right now, right here. They were just basically doing load management on the veteran who gets hurt a lot. So Pacheco, very unlikely to play next week. Who knows when he comes back. You got McKinnon on the waiver wire. I think you just grab him, especially if you happen to be in a standard league. Now, one guy I did talk about on last week's video for Beat the Breakout because he didn't make it in time for a waiver wire. It was on Monday night game, the Bengals and the Jags, and we saw Chase Brown out of nowhere have himself a decent performance. And what was really notable last week was that in the first quarter of the game, he was getting more touches than Joe Mixon. Now, of course, Mixon wound up outproducing him, outtouching him by the time it was all said and done. What would happen in week 14? It was kind of similar. Mixon got 21 carries, Chase Brown only 8. But here's what Chase Brown did. He had a 54-yard touchdown reception early in the game. And then he caught 2 more passes, wound up being the leading receiver for the Bengals in week 14. 3 catches, 80 yards in that touchdown, and 25 yards in the ground too. Now, people going crazy about guys like Keaton Mitchell, of course, Devon Achane. Don't think that Chase Brown isn't very similar because he is. In fact, on that touchdown that he scored this past week, he hit 22 miles per hour, officially the second fastest run of the entire season, only behind DK Metcalf last week. That's right, so Chase Brown, his speed, top speed, faster than Tyreek Hill or Jamar Chase. He will not be the lead back by any means here as long as Mixon is healthy, and it doesn't matter. He's one of these players who is special. He can do things with the ball in his hand and take it to the house on any given play, and so this is one of those players who's going to be not volume dependent, but has that huge upside each week because of what he just did. He can do it again. And it's not a bad matchup if you need to roll out a flex with some upside here. In week 15, the Bengals are going to be home again, and they get to play the Vikings. And that's going to lead me to my first quarterback recommendation for this week. Some of you still struggling to replace Joe Burrow at QB. Some of you might now need to replace Justin Herbert or CJ Stroud. We'll see how that goes. And some people just like to stream quarterbacks. You've just been picking guys with upside and favorable matchups all season. You're still doing it. Well, I think we got to look at Jake Browning now. I didn't want to fully buy into last week's performance because this was kind of an out of nowhere thing. You have to see it more than once before you anoint a guy a must start, especially somebody who, let's face it, just wasn't a high-end prospect coming into the pros, someone that was not on anyone's radar and only had opportunity to play because of injury. But now we have back-to-back impressive games from Jake Browning, and if you look purely at fantasy stats, week 14, going against the Colts, he put up 275 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and a cherry on top for those of us who chose to stream him in place of a guy like Kyler Murray or Sam Howell this week, he ran in a touchdown. Now, honestly, what I think is the most impressive about it is that he did this, and he didn't just rely on Jamar Chase to do all the legwork like last week. In fact, Jamar Chase only caught 3 passes for 29 yards, and that was on 4 targets. He wasn't dumping it off short and letting his receivers do all the work. He wasn't just relying on his one stud receiver to do it all. He was spreading the ball around. A touchdown to a tight end and Tanner Hudson, a running back. T. Higgins actually got involved. Browning is looking legit, and obviously this offense is tailored to his strengths, the way that they're planning, so got to give some props to Zach Taylor for doing some good work with this offense the last 2 weeks. So if you need a quarterback next week, you're looking for someone in the wire, Browning is still widely available. He's got to be a strong consideration. But I will say that my favorite quarterback for next week is a guy, if he's out there, just go grab him right now. In fact, even if you have a quarterback who isn't like maybe Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, one of those just top elite quarterbacks, you might want to just see if you can get Matt Stafford. And before I even tell you what Matt Stafford did in week 14, let's just tell you why. He gets the Commanders. If you don't know why that is so tempting, how about this? Washington has given up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. They've given up the most touchdowns, that would be 30. They have the second fewest interceptions, only 6. That's right, 30 touchdowns, 6 interceptions allowed to quarterbacks on the season. And then when you look at what Stafford has done lately, it's just hard not to want to start him anyways. This was not a good spot for him, and we were hearing the weather's going to be terrible. It was rainy, but it was obviously a little overblown in terms of how bad it would be. But on the road against Baltimore, in wet conditions, didn't matter. Stafford threw for 3 touchdowns, almost 300 yards again, went for 294. That makes a total of 10 passing touchdowns over the last 3 games. And 2 of those have been against some of the best defenses in the entire league in Baltimore and Cleveland. Now that all these weapons are back, Kupp, obviously good and healthy, Kyren Williams is back, Puka has been good, there's no stopping this offense apparently. So again, it almost doesn't even matter who you have at quarterback. If Stafford is out there, I think you should just go pick him up. Even if you have Jalen Hurts or Dak Prescott or whoever, just pick him up so somebody else can't. Now what if you're still looking for a tight end to replace Mark Andrews? Or you just have been streaming tight end position all season? All right, I've been a little slow to come around on this one. But I say right now, you can go ahead and grab Isaiah Likely. Sure, it seems obvious now, but again, let's remember last week the Ravens were on bye. The week before that, Likely hadn't done a whole lot. And in fact, when given the opportunity before in his NFL career, he hadn't shown that he could be a consistent producer. Well, I saw enough finally this week. I will say that the Rams have been terrible against tight ends all season. This was a smash spot for a guy like him. But he did 5 catches, 83 yards, and a touchdown, a long score early in that game. Yeah, what I look at is target share and opportunities. He got 7 targets. The Ravens aired it out, and that's what I was hoping for. We know the job is his rest of the season. Well, Andrews is out. We know Lamar is really good, and we know that likely next week we'll get the Jacksonville Jaguars, who were just carved up by David Njoku, had his best game by far of the season. So if Likely's out there, you can pretty much end your search there with tight end. Just go with him. Speaking of Jacksonville, Surprising to see Trevor Lawrence out there and looking pretty good and throwing the ball 50 times. Didn't expect that, but he did it. He was effective enough. But who would he throw to with Christian Kirk now gone? Well, the answer in terms of targets was Zay Jones. You might be shocked to find out that Zay Jones had 14 targets in this game because he did basically nothing with him. Only 5 catches for 29 yards. That's usually not the kind of stat line that would encourage me or anyone to say, hey, go pick this guy up. But remember, this was a tough defensive assignment for him and the Jaguars on the road in Cleveland. Not going to be easy next week because, again, they're going against this Ravens team, but we saw the Ravens give up plenty of passing yardage this week. But I always look for targets and target share for a receiver. Jones is going to get it. T-Law should be a little more efficient than he was this week. Hopefully the ankle's a little better. And this is almost a receiver I feel like you should stash even if you don't plan to play him in week 15. Because if you look at the final 3 weeks, gets Tampa Bay, Carolina, and if you happen to keep playing your playoffs in week 18, the Tennessee Titans. Those are 3 smash spots. So Zay Jones is a guy I think you gotta at least consider. And then, I talked about that Rams offense with Stafford. Well, obviously Kupp seems back. Puka did great. But there's another player, another receiver specifically, who's quietly been producing the last couple of weeks. I didn't want to talk about Demarcus Robinson last week because, this Rams offense tends to kind of pick guys out of nowhere and they pop up and have a week and then they disappear. But now it's 2 in a row for Robinson, and I already mentioned Tutu Atwell is out with a concussion. He might miss altogether next week. Against the Ravens, Robinson was targeted 10 times, as much as Cooper Kupp and more than Puka. He did a little something with it, only caught 3 of them, but 46 yards and caught a touchdown. But last week he had 4 catches for 55 yards and a touchdown too. So if we're finding a veteran receiver who has produced at least somewhat in the past, and he's now comfortable in the system and Stafford is throwing it his way a lot and he's scoring touchdowns, I think this is definitely worth a pickup, especially in your deeper leagues. And he's going to be free because not a lot of people are going to be on Robinson, and he's owned in basically 0% of any fantasy leagues right now. And did I already mention that the Rams get to play the Washington Commanders this next week, and it's at home? Yeah, this might be not just one of the sneakiest pickups of the week, but one of the sneakiest streamers of the week. You need help winning your playoff matchup or to clinch a playoff spot. Whatever it is, we've got you covered. Check out our Week 15 playlist with start sit advice and more.